You've been marching for 3 weeks. Your sandals are gone, shredded somewhere on a Macedonian road. Your shoulders are raw from 60 pounds of iron and leather. The sun is merciless. Your mouth tastes like dust. And now you're standing in formation, watching a wall of screaming men charge toward you. Your heart is in your throat. The soldier beside you is trembling. The roar of the enemy fills the world. Every nerve in your body is screaming the same word: run. But you don't. Not because you're fearless. Not because you love Rome. But because you know, with absolute certainty, that what Rome will do to you if you run is far, far worse than anything charging at you right now. The Roman legions didn't conquer the known world through superior tactics alone. They built their empire on something more fundamental than strategy: terror, directed inward, decimatio. We use the word decimate today to mean destruction on a large scale. But the Romans didn't speak in metaphors. Decimation meant exactly what it said: the removal of 1 in 10, your own men, killed by their own brothers. Here's how it worked. Your cohort broke. Maybe the enemy line was too strong. Maybe fear spread through the ranks like a disease. Maybe 500 men simply ran because 500 men are still human, and humans run from death. The battle ends. You survive. You think the worst is over. It isn't. Your commander assembles the cohort. Every soldier in the army watches. A tribune steps forward and strips you of your dignity in front of thousands. Your cowardice announced, your failure made permanent and public. Then the counting begins. You're divided into groups of 10. 9 men you trained with. 9 men who shared your food, your fire, your fear. And then you draw lots. 1 man in 10 draws the short straw. If it's you, you die. Not by a sword. Not by an executioner. By the hands of the 9 men standing beside you. They called it fustuarium, the punishment of the cudgel. The tribune touches you with a stick, a single tap. That's the signal. And then the clubs come down. Ancient accounts note that blows to the head were deliberately avoided. The Romans didn't want this to end quickly. They wanted you conscious. They wanted you to feel the arms go first, raised to protect yourself, snapped under the weight of hardwood. Then the ribs. Then the chest, caving inward. And all the while, you're looking into the faces of men who passed you bread yesterday. Most died in the dirt of the camp. But even those who somehow survived, who crawled away still breathing, found no mercy waiting. No family would shelter them. No village would take them in. Rome had declared them dead, and Rome's declaration was final.
Here's what people miss. Decimation didn't end with the execution. The 9 survivors weren't forgiven. They weren't relieved. They were given barley. To a Roman soldier, this was a precise, calculated humiliation. Barley was animal feed, livestock rations. You were being told, officially, publicly, in front of every man in camp, that you were no longer human. You were beneath contempt. And then you were expelled from the fortified camp entirely. Every night, you slept outside the walls, outside the protection, exposed to enemy raids, to the elements, to death with no one to answer for it. You lay in the dark knowing that if the enemy came, you'd be the first they reached, and not a single soldier inside those walls would move to help you. This continued until you redeemed yourself in combat, until you bought your way back to humanity with blood. The Romans understood something that modern military science has only recently caught up to. Shame can be more powerful than fear of death. They didn't just weaponize pain. They weaponized humiliation, guilt, and isolation, all at once. 72 BC. Rome was losing a war it refused to admit was a war. Spartacus, a Thracian gladiator, legally a piece of property, had been routing Roman legions for 2 years. Consuls had fallen. Entire units had broken and fled. The most powerful military civilization on earth was being beaten by men Rome didn't even consider fully human. The Senate turned to Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of the wealthiest, most ruthless men in Rome. And Crassus had one immediate problem. His soldiers feared Spartacus more than they feared him. That was intolerable. When a unit of his men fled from the slave army, Crassus acted without hesitation. He ordered decimation. Estimates vary wildly. Some ancient sources say 50 men died, others say closer to 4,000. The exact number has been lost. What wasn't lost was the effect. After the decimation, Crassus's legions stopped running. They held their lines against an enemy that had been destroying Roman formations for years. Because now the calculation had changed. The enemy might kill them. Rome definitely would. Spartacus was eventually cornered and killed. 6,000 of his followers were crucified along the Appian Way. Their bodies left as a message stretching 100 miles from Capua to Rome. But the message wasn't really for the slaves. It was for every Roman soldier who witnessed it. Fear your commander more than you fear the enemy. Here's the part that should genuinely disturb you. Decimation didn't punish the guilty. It punished a random tenth. It didn't matter if you had held your position longer than anyone else before the line collapsed. It didn't matter if you were the most decorated veteran in the unit, if you had fought in a dozen campaigns, if you had wounds on your chest from 100 battles. If the lot fell to you, your brothers were going to beat you to death. That was the genius of it. Randomness made it worse. Every survivor knew. Not thought, knew. That luck alone had kept him alive. That merit was irrelevant. That if this ever happened again, the math didn't care about his bravery. The guilt must have been suffocating. You watched a better soldier than you die because of a stone or a straw. You may have been the one to swing the club. And then you had to march on. Had to sleep in that empty space where your brother used to be. Had to eat your barley, knowing what your hands had done. Rome manufactured a culture where men would genuinely rather die fighting than survive a retreat. Where a soldier would charge into a hopeless position rather than show his back, because at least death in combat was death with honor. That was exactly what Rome wanted. Julius Caesar never had to decimate his legions. He barely had to try. During the Civil War, his 9th Legion, veterans of Gaul, men who had fought beside him for years and feared almost nothing, showed signs of mutiny. Caesar assembled them, looked them in the eye, and quietly announced he was considering decimation. That was all. The entire legion dropped to their knees. Officers threw themselves at his feet. Hardened soldiers who had walked through fire for this man begged him for mercy at the mere suggestion. Caesar never followed through. He didn't need to. The word alone had broken them. Mark Antony wasn't so restrained. After his legions faltered against the Parthians around 36 BC, he ordered immediate decimation. No deliberation, no warning. Every 10th man beaten to death by his companions. The survivors demoted to barley and expelled from the walls. The message spread across every Roman army in the east like cold water. There is no excuse. There is no circumstance that justifies breaking. You hold the line, or you die. And dying in battle is the merciful option. For over 500 years, from the early Republic into the late Empire, Roman soldiers lived under this shadow. Augustus threatened it. Galba carried it out. As late as the 3rd century AD, soldiers were still being selected by lot and beaten to death by their own comrades. So when you read about legions holding impossible positions, about Roman soldiers advancing into situations any rational person would flee, remember the full picture. It wasn't just discipline. It wasn't just training or tactics or pride in Rome. It was the knowledge that behind them stood something that made the enemy in front of them look almost merciful. That cowardice meant a lottery, that the lottery meant your brother's clubs. That survival meant barley and exile and a guilt that would follow you until you earned your way back to being human. Rome didn't build its empire by making its soldiers brave. It built its empire by making retreat unthinkable.